Ray coming in with the hard rights. Doughty's just hanging on. Ray with those heavy cylinders. One of the few stingers, Jim Lorenz.
This fight is what started it all. With Teemu Mania in full effect come the 92-93 season, many expected the Jets' front pages to be covered all over with Teemu Selanne, but that wasn't the case, as it was actually covered with Ty Domi. That's because while Teemu was breaking records, Domi was breaking faces. He was a feared opponent, yet one man was always able to keep Ty in check, and that was Rob Ray. After their first square off on February of 1993, it was evident that the two were just starting their feud. Both ended their duel with grins and skated off in preparation for their next dance. That would take place less than a month later. That March, Ray would once again showcase his dominance, but not without a little help, of course. For this, we need to fast forward to their third meetup in November of 93. Rob Ray was notorious for his interesting fighting tactics that included becoming shirtless to gain a competitive advantage. Some like to say that early on in the rivalry, Ray was a top dog, and that was because of his jersey strategy. When going shirtless, it gave his opponents less to grab onto, allowing Ray to take full control of the fight. Although it didn't quite work for him in round 3, it did leave to Domi and Ray exchanging words in the box. The two's rivalry would only continue to thicken after Domi requested a trade out of Winnipeg, being brought in to none other than Toronto, Ray's Sabres' rival team, and this allowed the QEW to reach new heights. Over the next several meetups, Ray continued his antics and Domi continued to help entertain the crowd. But once the NHL decided to put a stop to Ray's antics, it became a turning point in their heated battles. In 1996, after finally having enough, the league made the infamous Rob Ray rule, a rule that states, quote, "A player who deliberately takes off their jersey or modifies their jersey shall be given a 2-minute unsportsmanlike penalty and a game misconduct." This came after numerous complaints were made, and Ray decided to sew his jersey to his chest protector. With the Ray rule in effect, Domi began to gain a bit of an edge, and the two continued to duke it out, but now in a more even playing field. Both players provided memorable fights and memorable calls as well. Domi has a famous quote in which he states, "Let me fight your toughest guy. If I win, I get a spot on your team." And there's no denying that when both Domi and Ray were on the ice, you knew things were going to get interesting. Bottom line is that you can't make a video like this without mentioning Ray and Domi. And despite the two's rivalry on the ice, they both respected one another off it. Unlike these next two players, as one hit has been linked to the eventual downfall of one NHL team. Well, not entirely. To better understand what I mean, let's go back to 2011. At the time, one of the most feared players in terms of physicality was Bruins' Milan Lucic. His hard checks and physical nature would often get under the skin of his opponents, and what he did against Buffalo during a game in November was no exception.
Rotating, Lucic has a breakaway. The puck gets out beyond him, Miller way out, Lucic barrels into Miller, and here we go.
This hit lives in infamy with most Sabres fans, as it began the lasting feud between both the Sabres and Bruins throughout the course of the next 2 seasons. Many believe Lucic should have been suspended because of the hit, and others believe that the Sabres players were gutless for not sticking up for their hurt player. Miller was the star of the show in Buffalo, and when the players didn't stick up for him, it left a lot of people upset, including Sabres forward Paul Galstead, who embarrassingly admitted, quote, "I'm embarrassed that we didn't respond the way we should have." He tried to make up for it the following meetup, but at that point, it was already too late. Lucic became public enemy number 1 in Buffalo soon after. When asked about Lucic's actions in an interview, Miller infamously stated,
"I'm not gonna really get into that. I just stuck around because I just want to say that piece of shit I think Lucic is 50 pounds on me and runs me like that. It's unbelievable."
And even after 2 years passed by, Miller's wife Noreen would chirp Lucic after he would take a puck to the face against the Sabres, ironically getting her on the play. We now know how Buffalo fans and players felt about all this, but what about Lucic himself? Well, when the 2013 Bruins team met up on a Zoom call during quarantine, the incident would be brought up, and Lucic was still adamant that he wasn't in the wrong, stating, quote, he shouldn't have been standing in the way. Teammates Chris Kelly and Andrew Ferentz chimed in, mentioning, quote, you ruined their entire season, and you ruined their entire organization, to which Lucic would respond with, quote, it got them Jack Eichel, so it worked out. Ouch. Lucic wasn't all too respected during the 2010s, just like his now teammate in Calgary, who's already faced some rivalries of his own. Matthew Tkachuk was already rubbing people the wrong way as soon as he entered the NHL. Just ask Drew Doughty, as the two would begin butting heads early in Tkachuk's career. To pinpoint exactly where things kicked off, we need to go to March of 2017 during the third meetup between the Kings and Flames. While battling for a loose puck along the boards, Tkachuk would deliver an elbow right to the face of Doughty, causing him to fall on all fours. This obviously left a sour taste in Drew's mouth, and he expressed his displeasure after the game, stating, quote, he's a dirty player, that kid. To be a rookie and play like that is a little surprising, to which Tkachuk responded that he wasn't going to change his game at all. He then backed up that claim a week later by attempting to absolutely bulldoze Doughty at center ice. Luckily, he managed to dodge the bullet, but once again would voice his opinion, stating, I expected more from him, honestly. After a few words in the penalty box games later, the two were quiet up until January of 2018, when after Tkachuk stuck his stick in the side of Doughty, Doughty was fed up and wasn't holding back when being asked whether Matthew was the most hated player in the league, agreeing wholeheartedly to the statement. That's when Brady comes in. Matthew's younger brother fired back in an interview, stating,
a lot of guys don't like him, but like I said, his teammates love him, and I think anybody, would be lying, said that's a guy you want on your team. So
the two would continue to butt heads with one another and would also continue to sound off at one another, but one of my personal favorites is one of which from 2019, when after Tkachuk was asked if he should show some more respect to the former Norris winner, Matthew responded with, quote, I show Gio respect, and he's a Norris Trophy winner. Perhaps karma served Matthew well. Just go back to October of 2019, when after Tkachuk tied the game late in the third, Doughty would one-up him, delivering the dagger to end the game in overtime. To this day, the two continue to banter back and forth and are still one of the most entertaining player rivalries the NHL has to offer to date. Perhaps one of the most underrated player rivalries of the 90s was Lyle Odeline versus Matthew Barnaby. The two would fight quite a lot before the turn of the century, 4 times to be exact, and the two would also state their displeasure towards one another. But how did these two begin to despise one another? Well, during their first fight, the analyst describes a story in which Odeline intentionally flipped a puck towards the Buffalo bench during his tenure as a Hab, and Barnaby wanted his revenge, thus making the fight possible. But the two players would continue to bicker back and forth and drop the gloves, and by 1999, things finally went overboard. By now, Barnaby was already a thorn in Odeline's side, but when Matthew's Pens met up with Lyle's Devils in the playoffs that year, things got ugly fast. That Friday, Barnaby would state to the media that Odeline looked like, quote, Cornelius from Planet of the Apes. Lyle then fired back with perhaps the most savage quotes I've ever read, stating, you should look at his wife. She's god awful to look at. That comment obviously enraged Barnaby, but specifically his wife, who then told Matthew to get him. And after a shocking Game 2 win for the Penguins, Barnaby told the media, quote, Odeline better watch out. My wife's Italian. You might not want to be messing with the wrong people. It also didn't help that Lyle played one of his worst games that night either, as Barnaby mentions that he, quote, came very close to putting it in his own net. That would have been nice to see. In the end, Barnaby's Penguins got the last laugh, winning in 7 games and advancing to face the Leafs in the following round. The two would still butt heads on the ice afterwards, fighting late in their careers for old time's sake, and sometimes they'll even continue to chirp one another to this day. Just go back to 2015, when Barnaby would tweet out, quote, I miss my buddy, hashtag Cornelius, showcasing a photo of none other than the toy monkey from Planet of the Apes. There's no better way to end this video than by bringing up the obvious. Sean Avery was one of the most annoying pests the league's ever seen, and the great Martin Brodeur would definitely have to agree. On February 20th, 2007, at the end of the second period, Avery had the puck up ice and collided into Brodeur, causing a scrum to ensue behind the net. Avery would pick up a goaltender interference penalty, and New Jersey would win the game. The two would vent their frustrations and awaited their next matchup. Fast forward to November of the following season, and the two would pick up right where they left off. Avery almost caused a fight during warm-ups due to chirping Marty and getting feisty with Brodeur's teammates. Once the game actually started, he would distract his new pal and would score on him. Keep that in mind as we continue on. That season, the Rangers and the Devils would meet up in the playoffs, and Avery got hot. In game 1, he would score, and in game 2, he would actually score the game winner. Brodeur would state to the media afterwards a statement that explained why the two hated each other so much. Marty said that Sean needed new material, and that he was saying the same things for 5 years. Well, what happened 5 years ago? Brodeur's infamous affair. Avery took his advice and found new material alright, causing his notorious Game 3 stick swing fest to begin. Avery would turn his back to the play, swinging his stick in Brodeur's face, causing Marty to become distracted. 30 seconds later, expecting Avery to do it again, Brodeur would get confused and allowed a goal to none other than, well, Avery. Afterwards, the NHL would create the Avery rule, making it illegal to stand in front of a goalie and wave his or her stick in the netminder's face. The Rangers would win the series in 5 games, and afterwards, in the handshake line, Avery attempted to shake Marty's hand, but Brodeur couldn't get himself to do it, making Avery call him out on it.
Well, everyone talks about how unclassy I am, and Fatso there just forgot to shake my hand, I guess, so.
2 months into the following season, Avery would be suspended for his comments made that were deemed a bit inappropriate.
And I just wanted to comment on how it's become like a common thing in the NHL for guys to fall in love with my sloppy seconds.
The league would force him into anger management, and once all was said and done, Avery's on-ice antics began to settle down, and he began enjoying himself post-retirement. Enjoying himself to the point where he would actually go on Dancing with the Stars. But Brodeur would take the chance to chirp an old foe after Sean's early boot, stating, quote, "What more can he do to embarrass himself?" There it is. Avery fired back the only way he could, tweeting out, quote, "Embarrassing is when you sleep with the nanny and get caught." Rivalries are always fun and make the game exciting, but there's something different when it comes to player rivalries that really make them stand out. As seen in today's video, they're sometimes extremely personal, and it can cause many memorable moments that can impact the game to the point of changing it, as all it takes is one punch, strategy, or even an annoying tactic to make enemies on the ice and history along the way.